name's Keith Bradshaw. I'm a senior partner at Speirs Major Light Architecture. My role is to lead the design on many of the projects. I've worked within lighting for about 25 years, and a lot of my work has been working on international projects in different regions around the world. So when we first heard this term At-Turaif, we immediately started to search what At-Turaif was and what it meant. And we were totally blown away by what this project was, what it looked like. It was a whole set of new knowledge for us in terms of architectural heritage in Saudi Arabia. And also we understood that it sat at the heart of a development. It was the kind of the anchor point for a new development, which was the Dir'iyah Gate project.
My name is Roger Wilson. I'm the Chief Design Officer for Dir'iyah Gate Development Company. The project is a unique project in the truest sense of the word. It is about lighting a World Heritage Site, At-Turaif, the place of the founding of the first Saudi state. And the project was really around providing an ambient lighting solution for what is a city, a mud and render city. So it has a very specific texture and feel and colour and tone. And we wanted to try and find an ambient lighting solution that brought all of this out, but also helped people understand the depth and the volume of the buildings and to not flatten the architecture and the built form. When we started the process for selecting the designer for this project, part of the RFP was to provide a thought piece, a design thought piece, and Speirs Major provided a very good thought piece. It was interactive, it was visual. It immediately told us that they knew what they were dealing with here.
Within any approach, there's a certain amount of information. And as part of that information pack was a whole series of images and explanations about the story of the project and the fact that it was a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it was only through talking to the client team, a broad range of people in the client team, that kind of wanted different things from the projects, we started to hear these stories of the cultural significance and the kind of spiritual, magical significance of this project. And you know, that's music to our ears. These are things that we can immediately respond to and start to kind of play back through concepts. So even at the initial stage, we started to draw ideas very quickly. We recognized that there was lots of stories, narratives about the site and what the site had been through and why it looked the way it did and what it represented to the future. We could maybe explain or amplify with light. A lot of our work historically has been trying to find ways in which light can be a metaphor for storytelling. There isn't the ego where we have to immediately think about what signature we're going to make on the project. I don't think good lighting design is that. It's kind of chameleon-like in many ways, lighting design. You have to move into the project and embed yourself in it and understand what the project is about. We understood that we were working on a different scale to anything we'd done before. It was a big project, but it was a project that people would inhabit and walk around and experience at very, very close quarters. The other aspect of the project was, of course, it needed to tell its story as a single piece. The Turaif is built next to Wadi Hanifa. The reason why the city grew is because of the agriculture of the wadi. And initially there was a small settlement which had a mosque. The mosque got bigger, the city got bigger, until eventually it was a very sizable city next to the wadi. There were many, many viewing angles that we had to think about, which meant that it was an incredibly three-dimensional, layered piece of work, and took a lot more time than any of us anticipated to go to every one of the locations and think carefully, because you put a light over here because it looks great from this view, but then of course very much in the round you have to understand the consequence of that from a different view. There's also a kind of intermediate space when you arrive almost at the city and it's there right in front of you and it starts to tell its stories. You start to understand just how complicated and layered the project is, the textures, the architectural integrity of this city. And you start to understand what is inside and outside. And then when you walk into the streets and you discover that the streets then have courtyards coming off them. And the Najdi architecture is centered around courtyards. And you start to understand first floor, second floor, half staircases, you understand rooms, what the rooms would have been coming off the courtyard. That immediately seemed very important to us, that we were dealing with a building that three-dimensionally had an inside, or the remnants of an inside, and an outside. And of course the outside addresses the streets. So that kind of layered experience or layered expression of inside and outside, near and far, was on our mind the whole time as we were developing the ideas and trying to communicate. It's going to look great from here, but it's also going to be great when you're standing here as well, which is a very, very tricky thing to do while you're trying to integrate lighting beautifully, where people can still experience it at close quarters but not be distracted by equipment. So the material surface of the entire site is quite extraordinary because the buildings are made of the same material as the ground. So it has a singular tone. There are variations in texture, but you're basically dealing with an architecture which is made of the same material as the ground, which is quite remarkable. The use of mud bricks, baked mud bricks, and then render over the surface. It feels like the architecture has been kind of formed and carved out of the earth. That means that you have to think very much about how you express horizontal and vertical, because they almost look like they're the same tone. What was also really important is to find the right tone of light that would express that beautiful material, but also have a warmth and a resonance to it that felt that it was almost the only perfect light for that project. Certainly on heritage projects where you're dealing with a material and a texture, that there is only one tone of light that really makes it tell its story properly.
We wanted to create a lighting tone that was sympathetic to what we're doing elsewhere in Dir'iyah Gate, and that is essentially an apricot amber colour tone. And we had to come up with a solution that minimised the direct lighting and kept it as ambient and deflected lighting, so that really all one was aware of was the glow of the buildings, the volume, the distance and the space. So it became a much more volumetric experience as you looked at it from the prime viewing point, which is Bajeri Terrace. We did many viewings, we did many tests late at night when it was dark and there weren't too many people around. From those initial tests, we arrived at a solution that I think everybody is pleased with. It took time. There were lots of minor adjustments. It wasn't just of colours and colour temperature and tone. It's quite complicated. I think what we achieved was a solution that I'm very pleased with. My colleague, the president of the DevCo, Mohammed Saadi, is very pleased with, and importantly, Jerry Inzerillo, the chief executive, is very pleased with, as are the board. And I think that goes right the way up to the top. It's a sea change for At-Turaif. It suddenly becomes alive, whereas once it was perhaps less than that. And it is an experience for people to appreciate as they dine in Bajeri Terrace, which is also part of the Dir'iyah Gate development.
To find the perfect tone of light was actually lots and lots of hard work. The sun is still in the same place that it was 300 years ago. The building is in the same place, so the relationship between the natural light and the place is exactly as it was, of course. And I think that we wanted to make sure that as we moved into the night, to kind of amplify the story and the qualities of Turaif and its materials, that it felt natural. It didn't feel like it suddenly had a different personality. So we recognized that we were kind of more in a kind of a slightly low color rendering, warm red, gold, apricot, as it's been coined. It's a kind of rose gold tone. And that rose gold tone feels perfect. And to find that rose gold tone, it took us probably 9 months. It sounds simple, because you think you've nearly got it. So in the end, we ended up with, I think from memory, 5 versions of what we believed was the right tone. Then as a team, and with the client, Jerry and Zirilio, who was very patient with us, listened very careful to an explanation of what we believed were, as it were, the expression of what gold, rose gold, apricot meant. And we agreed the perfect tone, the perfect calibration of rose gold. And it was just very clear in that moment, in that singular moment, that it was perfect.
We had Jerry and Zirillo visit us late at night when we were testing the various mock-ups for the lighting. And he was gradually getting won over by the process and the efforts that we were making to experiment with many different kinds of lighting setting, tonal setting, colour, temperature setting, and he could gradually see something emerging. The final test fit that we did one evening, he absolutely loved it, and it was a very simple yes from him to go ahead and implement the full project.
It's almost as if it's it's a permanent resonance of the sun somehow, caught in the building. It's as if somehow the buildings have held on to this golden glow of the sun, which meant that as you watch the project over the sunset periods, which we've done many, many times, and you watch the natural light fall and the artificial light rays, it feels like a very natural connection between one and the other. So when you look at it, you realize that it's an authentic piece of Saudi heritage, really.
So my name is ad-Dir'iyah. I'm a lighting designer for Speirs Major for 15 years now as a design associate. On the At-Turaif project, which is a very, very special site and very, very special project because there's a lot of heritage and 9G architecture. My role was really to make things happen and to get the process with a contractor, with a local project manager, and the client, to be sure we convince the ideas, the design, and then to make it happen. When we started in late 2021 and autumn 2021 with a concept, we've done a presentation, and then we have to make some tests to present it and to be sure it was exactly our design intent. And then from this test, we went to a large-scale mock-up in April 2022. And that was the kickoff of the rollout of all the design into drawings and plans to get everything as we expect and to start the process of installation about 6 months later. And one of the most important things was to get everything in zoning and phasing so we can install everything step by step and doing areas by areas. So in total we have 12 zones for the entire site. The site is about 9 hectares and it was about 2,600 linears and over 500 wash lights to create this grazing effect on the wall or on the courtyard and to reveal the architecture of the city.
When you start to understand the phasing of the project, we broke the whole city into 12 phases. And by quarter 3 of 2022, we wanted to have probably what equated to about half of the project lit and operational, permanently lit and operational. So that was a supercharged process between the design ideas, the conversations about who would be able to help us, and then once we'd agreed that, how quickly that equipment could arrive. And what was astonishing was how everything fell into place. Design decisions, the confidence the client had very quickly, not just in us as the designers, but also in the preferred manufacturers who were Martin Professional, how quickly they signed off and went, let's get going. And then Martin Professional's job was to make sure that the supply route and the delivery and bringing that amount of equipment into Saudi Arabia, getting it to site and getting it installed through the summer months in Saudi Arabia, where we're suddenly into mid-30s, mid-40s. Through the evening, through the night, was quite incredible, actually. And this isn't temporary equipment lying on the floor. This is permanently installed into a historic monument, getting permission from the Heritage and Culture Commission that look after At-Turaif to get their permission to install it. So all of those things had to happen with extreme precision. And then after the late 22, we delivered the phases piece by piece by piece.
I'm Ian Ruxton. I'm the associate partner here at Speirs Major. My role now is technical leadership. Certainly design and implementation of complex control systems is very much part of my job. And that often these days extends to the actual sitting on site all night, programming and integration and all of that. And that's been a major part of my role on this project. The design of the control system was in our minds from the very, very beginning. We knew that there were going to be an awful lot of lights. We didn't know for sure how many when we started, but we knew it was going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of lights. We knew that it would be kinetic BMX lights because we were going to need to change color and have subtle shifts and have various different looks. So the control was always going to be complex. It's also a physically large site. On this particular site, there are great limitations because it's a heritage site on running cables and where you can't just dig a hole anywhere and put a trench in and run cables, whether it's power or data.
One aspect of the project that was really important for us was to keep this authentic feel when you were next to the project, when you were standing in the streets or next to one of the major buildings. The light had to come from beneath, it had to come from the bottom, it had to feel like it was at that human level where people would have had lanterns, or lanterns would have been in the streets to illuminate the way people move through the city when it was inhabited. So, of course, we've then got an extraordinary amount of equipment and pieces of kit that we want to put in the street and find a neat way to integrate it. But we're integrating into UNESCO heritage sites. It had to be done very carefully. So we came up with a very neat way to conceal the fixtures and hide the 21st century reality of lighting, which was steel channels, glazing, cables, connectors, all the stuff that comes with a lighting installation. In the streets, we wanted to go in effectively a gravel line. Lots of the spaces have gravel in the infill between the Riyadh stone pavers, which make the street, and the mud brick walls. So we semi-recessed, which means that at no point, even when it rains, do the fixtures sit in puddles. They're semi-recessed in many occasions. They sit within gravel, but they have a shield around them. And that shield was something that we worked very closely with Heritage and Culture to get the tone of that perfect. The shields that we had are colour matched to the stone. So by day they look very neutral. Nothing's ever invisible, but it's very, very neutral. And they are perfectly scaled to be the kind of the final attachment to the equipment. It's a permanent installation, but we've not drilled into any stone, so you could remove the equipment in time. That's the very important part of working in heritage, that you have the ability to remove equipment should that be required in the future. We haven't drilled into any heritage stonework or anything like that. But the shield then just clips on at the last moment, just to hide away the 21st century. You just have this feeling of light on the buildings, and the feeling of light so well integrated that you, in some instances, you don't care where the light is coming from. It's just the feel, and that was what we were looking for from the very start. A kind of secret aspect that I would encourage people who visit to look at is the interiors of the courtyards and the interiors of the buildings. And when you step in there, you understand a building, and a building with staircases or the remnants of staircases, and the original kind of palm tree rafters that held up the second floor. And for us, what's interesting about that we wanted to reveal the textures and forms of the interior. And that would be beautiful to see from the outside, so you understood this interior-exterior story. But if you went into one of these places, it felt just beautifully and softly illuminated. But by doing so, and again from ground level, hidden within the gravel, or hidden behind the corner so you never quite know where the light's coming from, you get wonderful shadows and textures of light coming from the bottom, which again feels very human scale, very almost domestic in some spaces, that the light was almost the light that was left behind, in a funny way, that although the inhabitants have left and the materials of life have gone away, the scale of the light, the feel of the light still feels authentic to the interiors. There's also that scale of lighting that the project had to be successful at as well.
We plumped for a large system using Pharos designer products. This is partially because We like that product. We have a lot of faith in it. It's very flexible. It can do what we need to do. We try to go with things we can trust on both the lights and on the control side. The idea of having sort of one central controller with lots and lots of output, as you would generally do perhaps in an entertainment environment, doesn't really fly here. The system needs to be distributed. It needs to be, there are several controllers around the site, lots of output devices around the site. I think we've got about 30 output devices that provide the final DMX to the lights themselves. So we minimize all our DMX cabling. We just get an output device at the nearest point on the local network that we can use and run DMX out from there. It's a big system. I think, from memory, I think I've got about 30,000 DMX addresses patched at the moment. It's not a huge channel count compared to big LED matrix jobs, you know, media facade stuff, things, anything with, you know, rows and rows of pixels. Obviously, your channel counts get very high very quickly. And compared to those, it's not a huge count. But given that all those DMX channels are running RGBW fixtures, actual lights, not pixels, it's pretty massive. These lights, they're RGBW lights, so we can control color. We can look at it as color. We can look at it as color temperature of white. Obviously, we can vary intensity. And we need to do that on every single light. You know, they're all individually addressed. Now, a lot of them do much the same thing at much the same time. But we always knew everything needed to be individually addressed because there are places where the nature of the site just requires some pragmatic programming. You know, you look at it and it looks as though it's all the same color. You look at it by day and you think, yeah, it's all the same kind of brown. It really isn't. You know, not all the materials are the same, not all the colors are the same. So in order to get our lit look right, there are some places, some surfaces that don't behave the same way as the one adjacent. So it's like, okay, we need to pull that out. We need to make that a separate group in our control system, and we need to give it a slightly different set of color values to make it blend in. Because right now, for some weird reason, it looks green when everything else is apricot gold. And you know, there's a few places like that. So we need that addressability. We need that flexibility in the control system to be able to group things in many different ways on the fly, which we get from this system. It also allows us, of course, to do the different looks that we have.
One aspect of the project which is an extra layer of magic or an extra layer of kind of cultural significance is what happens every time there is a full moon. And the lunar cycle is very, very important in Islamic culture. And in Saudi Arabia, of course, this connection between cultural monuments and Islam is very, very strong. So At-Turaif was built and founded around two things really, agriculture and Islam. So we wanted to recognize the significance of the mosque within the city. The interior courtyards and the exterior elevations as they are very purely expressed as being seen as moonlight on the outside with warmth on the inside of the courtyard. So the warmth being the interiors, as it were, and the moonlight being the exterior.
By doing that, you know, you really reveal that these were actual buildings and they had an interior and an exterior and that people lived in them. So we have that human warmth inside and we have the silvery kind of moon blue outside. We have an all green scene, which may sound a bit weird in architectural lighting. We don't use green very often as a color, but it's the color of the Saudi flag. When they have the national day in Saudi, everything's lit up green. So we need to be part of that. So National Day, it's green. We also have a white look. It's actually two subtle tones of white, which is for their Founders Day, white being the other colour in the flag. One of the key things for the success of this project was the support locally and remotely, but the support from both Martin as the manufacturers of the luminaire and also from Pharos, the manufacturers of the controllers, plus the actual installers, contractors on site and the local support integrated team. We knew early on with this that the only way we were going to succeed was to get somebody in that we had the relationship with and who was big enough and experienced enough to take this on and deliver it, and had all the right connections and all the right partners. It has to last, it has to keep working, they have to be able to rely on it in the long term. It's inevitable there will be the occasional failure, but there needs to be a way of dealing with that quickly and efficiently. Along with Martin, we developed a pretty thorough tagging system where every light has got a label on it with a complex tag that identifies what it is, where it is, what its DMX start address should be, and various other bits of information, what power cable it's on and what distribution board it's connected to. Everything is encoded into this tag. So we've made it as easy as possible to look after. The whole system should have genuine longevity and genuine maintainability.
The first thing for us, because we're independent, is to think immediately about what's the right kit for the job. So on a project of this type, you're in a very varied climate. You've got extreme heat, you've got flooding, you've got the effects of sandstorms. It's actually a public space as well, so it has to be robust when it's dealing with public moving through on golf carts as they can through At-Turaif. So it had to be a robust piece of kit, but beyond that, the invisible was the people that we wanted to work with to help us deliver it. And I think that with Martin Professional, we've had very, very important relationships which have developed over the last 25 years. And with particular people that we've been through it together. And I don't just mean a few late nights, I mean many, many late nights. And also the ups and downs of delivering innovative projects when we're all right at the edge of what we know that as companies we can deliver. This project for us as Speirs Major was very challenging, but we wanted to do it. So then we wanted to bring people in who we also knew loved the challenge, but it would be tricky for them. And I think that what we've handled together as Martin Professional through various projects is a level of trust that even when the going's tough, that we stick together and we find a good solution. And I think that that is very, very unique. The relationships, the trust, and also the trust which goes not just from the relationships at headquarters, but also with local teams that we've worked with, who we know go to that extraordinary length to deliver these projects, which involves all the complexities and pieces, the stories we never tell. If it was going to happen, it was probably going to happen with that team.
I know Speirs Major from my previous lives in London, and I was very well aware of their capability. They were the right people to work with us, and they've worked closely with us. It's been a to and fro process, and we've listened to them, and they've listened to us, and through that holistic collaboration process, we've ended up with, I think, a very worthy solution to what is a very unique World Heritage Site.